Hi theory students. Today we're going to be covering the last part of chapter 12 about connecting the dominant and tonic areas and harmonizing folk melodies. In order to connect the dominant and the final tonic area, the goal is to move each of the four voices in a way that best supports the 5-to-1 resolution. I'll show you on the staff. The summary is to move the bass either 5-to-1, this is the most conclusive way to do it, or 7-to-1 in the bass, to give the one chord a conclusive resolution. For the upper voices, whichever voice has a leading tone resolves to the tonic. In minor keys, we have to raise scale degree 7 to create a leading tone. Normally the upper voice that has scale degree 5 repeats it, since 5 is common to both the 5 and 1, and the remaining voice goes to the third of the one chord, filling it out. I'll show you here. In the first case in C major, we have a 5 chord. Note that the bass is G, the root of the 5 chord, and I've got it doubled there. We take the leading tone, which is in the soprano, and take the leading tone up to the tonic. We take scale degree 5 in the alto and repeat it. The bass will go 5-1. And now I'm missing a third in the one chord. I'll take the D in the tenor and bring that up to E. So it sounds like this. Great. If I wanted something a little less conclusive, I might have a first inversion 5 chord, as you see in the next example. Now the leading tone in the bass will go to the tonic, and since we don't double the leading tone, there will not be a B in one of the upper voices. So I can take one of the Ds down to the tonic, I can keep scale degree 5, and move the other D up to the third of the one chord. So it sounds like this. In a minor key like E minor, note that when I have the 5 chord here, I'm going to raise scale degree 7 to make a leading tone, which will go to the tonic, and I'll write it like this. D sharp in the alto goes to E. I'll keep scale degree 5 in the tenor and let the soprano fill out the third of the one chord. To repeat, leading tone, whatever voice it's in, will go up to the tonic. The conclusive cadence, most conclusive, goes 5-1 in the bass, but we can have 7-1 in the bass as well. Scale degree 5 in the upper voice will tend to stay, and then I have to fill out the chord and have a third in that one chord, and whatever voice is left fills in that third. We do have one exception. When we have a perfect authentic cadence where the soprano moves 2-to-1, we often end on a one chord without a fifth and with a tripled root. I'll show you that example at the end. In the meantime, I have to show you one of the things that we avoid doing. We avoid moving the same pair of voices in parallel fifths or parallel octaves, or for that matter, fifths or octaves in contrary motion. So here are some examples we avoid. In the first case, parallel octaves, Notice the soprano is going from C to F, and the bass is going from C to F. They're an octave apart on the 5 chord, and they're an octave apart on the 1 chord. And I couldn't get out of this simply by taking the soprano down to the F. That's what we call contrary octaves, or octaves in contrary motion. Likewise, in the second situation, I can't move the voices bass and soprano in fifths together. We call that parallel fifths. The last example is the one I showed you where we have an incomplete one, where we want to take the soprano to 1 or re, do. In a case like this, notice I still have my leading tone resolving. I want it to go re, do in the soprano. If the bass goes sol, do, or 5 to 1, I need a third in that 1 chord. That happens in the tenor. And we're okay, momentarily at least, to have 1, 2, 3 Fs, that's a tonic, and 1 A, that's a third. Now let's talk about harmonizing folk melodies. Unlike chorales, which are usually 1 chord per chorale note, here the chords can last for several notes. The duration of these chords is called the harmonic rhythm. The harmonic rhythm of folk tunes is often, but not always, 1 chord per measure. And just as you can have several rhythms in a melody, you can also have several chord lengths or harmonic rhythms as well, but there tends to be one rhythm that you get more often than the others. In order to find the chord within a harmonic rhythm, look at the scale degrees of the melody to see which chord fits, and for the moment we'll only be using 5 and 1. So in this melody, from Merrily We Roll Along, in this case, if the harmonic rhythm is 1 chord per measure, note the F sharp and D, framing this with passing tone E, there and there. So that outlines a 1 chord. Second measure, scale degree 3 is repeated. That's part of the 1 chord. Third measure, scale degree 2 is repeated. That's part of the 5 chord, not the 1. And measure 4, scale degrees 3 and 5, which belong to the 1 chord. So if I were to do these in block chords, and I want to be careful here not to write parallel fifths, there, we repeat this. Now when we go to the 5, I want to be careful not to write parallel fifths. So I'll take it down there and back there. So it would sound like this. And you could see how those harmonies fit with what's going on in the melody. We'd like to do something a little more interesting in the accompaniment. So there are all kinds of patterns we can have that spell this chord out in a more interesting rhythmic way. You could look in the examples in the book. So it might be something like this. Or even and so on. Look at some of the examples in the book to see the different kinds of accompaniment that you can have. We'll talk more in class about how to harmonize these folk melodies, but that's all for today.